I know there was a big movement or bill passed in 2016 that changed financial aid. And there were two important items that changed. Could you talk about those?
I sure
what
can.
they are and the details?
Absolutely. This was something that the financial aid industry had asked for many years. Beginning with the 2017-18 financial aid year, students and parents were now able to use tax information from 2 years ago. So that meant for 2017-18, they used their 2015 tax information. And the benefit for that is most folks had their tax returns completed at that time. In the past, we oftentimes helped students and families who had not completed a return yet. They were scrambling to find information, and it was a challenge all around. So a big change there. It was often called prior year. That was the buzzword, so to speak. That was the first change. And the second change was the timing. Prior to 2017-18, the FAFSA was always available around January 1st of each year. But this time, it was available on October 1st, giving families a lot more time to complete the FAFSA, complete corrections, make sure everything was accurate, and possibly receive aid information earlier.
Okay. Did that affect the way and when people applied for financial aid?
It certainly did. We saw a lot of folks apply very early, and we were really appreciative of that because that gave us time to look at FAFSAs received at the University of South Carolina, Columbia, and reach out to those families if we had questions. In the past, we had a little bit of a compressed time frame, but now we had about 8 more weeks to work with them and make sure we had as many folks ready to award around April the 1st as possible.
Okay. Now I have a question, and this is for families and who may have first-time students in colleges. When do you really start to prepare for college in that financial aid form?
You know, it's interesting. I speak to a lot of families like this. You really begin completing it your senior year, okay, that October of your senior year. But I really encourage families to look at this as early as possible. Even before you would actually fill it out for real, it's good to get an idea of the kind of questions that it asks so a family can be prepared. A lot of times the form is a little daunting, particularly if this is the first time you've got a student in the family going to college. And so I always encourage folks to begin early. Just be prepared and understand what it's asking for so that it won't be overwhelming once it's time to complete it actually in October of each year.
Okay. How do they know, based on family income, where they want to go and how that all shapes out for them?
It really becomes kind of a balancing act as a family begins to look at what are the institutions the student wishes to go to, what are the costs of those institutions, and what is a reasonable expectation of the aid that they might be able to receive. That last part is sometimes the hardest part to know for sure. What we always recommend to folks is, apply to the colleges in which you're interested in, look very carefully at the aid packages that you get, and determine which one is best for you in terms of all the things that you believe are important in a college education. So very, very complicated, lots of variables, lots of decision points.
I see. So if I were a senior in high school now, what are the checklists, the must-do that I should have completed this year?
From my perspective, the checklist involves primarily completing the free application for federal student aid. Okay, that comes out in October. So that means to be prepared, have everything ready, 2016 tax return, W-2s, an idea of what schools you'll be applying to, so that when you complete the FAFSA, you can enter that information quickly and include all the schools for which you plan to apply for eligibility and admission. So it's important that schools have that information as early as possible and do that. That is probably the biggest piece on the checklist. The second piece I would suggest is, if you have not already, pay very close attention to the institutional scholarships available. You want to apply for any and all of those. Some schools have applications, some do not. So it's important to be very, very, very diligent in looking at those sources because there's a lot of people competing for those. And then perhaps one that maybe folks don't think about as much is look for scholarship opportunities in your local community. There are a lot of the emphasis on the big scholarships, but it's important to look for ones that might be right in your own backyard, perhaps with an employer, a church, a civic organization. There's lots of those out there, and it's important not to miss those as well. They can make the difference between attending school and not.
All right. And given the fact that we have diverse schools in South Carolina and many different districts and abilities and funding, you mentioned the guidance counselor. So what specifically should a student be asking of the guidance counselor, or where can they find resources to help them with this if they don't have a guidance counselor?
I think if they do have access to a guidance counselor, they should be speaking with them about where it is that they intend to go to college, what they intend to do there, and that student and the guidance counselor look very carefully at costs and benefits and determine if that's a good fit for them. A guidance counselor is going to be the expert in that, particularly for the schools in this state. Okay, that's a very, very important piece. If a student does not have access to a guidance counselor, we always encourage them to contact the financial aid office at the institutions where they're interested in. We talk to a lot of families who don't ultimately come to the University of South Carolina, but that's okay. We want to make sure they get the information they need to make the right decision. So if there's no guidance counselor or source available, reach out to the institution itself, and they'll be happy to help you.
And scholarships. I think that's important. You said make sure that they know what scholarships are at their institution.
Right.
How do they do that? Where do they go? What websites?
I think most often now the best source is to go to the school's website. Okay. Most schools, if not all schools now, have their scholarship information prominently displayed. All the information they need, not just the scholarships that the institution offers, but maybe the schools inside the institution as well. It's important to look at those as well. There are a lot of search engines out there to help you find scholarships. It's important to look at those very carefully. Some charge a fee. You want to make sure that they're actually worth the money that you're spending if you're going to use those. So again, it's kind of a strategy of looking at a number of different places, but I always recommend to start with the school's website. They're going to have the most concise information, the most updated information, and application information should you need it.
Okay. And could you talk a little bit about the details of the loans?
Certainly, I certainly can. So a lot of publicity around loans these days. Okay, so the truth of the matter is that for a lot of families, some responsible, intelligent borrowing is just a fact of reality to earn a degree from an institution. Just costs and other drivers. It really is important to think about that as possibly a part of what's required to earn an education. And I mention this a lot because I do speak to a lot of families who are very worried about debt, very worried about borrowing more than they can afford to pay back. And so my advice to them is just pay very careful attention up front to how much you borrow and how much you expect to earn when you get out, and make sure that you've made some conscious decisions. When you think about it, I talk to a lot of families who are worried about borrowing at all, and I try to remind them that a lot of studies out there that a college education can result in over $1 million more in earnings over a lifetime, over a high school education.
That's amazing.
That's an excellent return on your investment,
yes.
Right? So it's important to think about that. So when you think about the types of loans, it's really important to remember that the best ones generally come from the FAFSA. Okay, so if folks wonder if they should fill it out, I always recommend everyone fill it out at least for the first year, because the best loan programs are from the federal government, and they do come from the FAFSA. That's where you want to go first.
Okay, all right.
Try to get an idea of what the cost will be, and not just tuition. Make sure that you look at all the costs: tuition, room and board, books, supplies. Get an idea of how much you think it'll cost in a year, and then look at what you think you'll need to make up in the difference in loans and other programs if you were to earn some of these scholarships and grants. Again, kind of a balancing act, a little bit of speculation, but it's important to be prepared in that regard.
What are the issues that new students, freshmen or first-year students may experience and need to come to your office?
Sometimes what happens is they've done their due diligence, they've planned for costs, and perhaps it just didn't quite turn out the way they thought. Sometimes perhaps charges are different than they expected, perhaps a change in the family's income has occurred. All those different variables. If something has happened and needs some additional assistance, we encourage them highly to come to our office. Come visit with us. Give us a call on the phone and let us talk through the issues that you're encountering with us, and let's make sure that we have everything in order. Because sometimes it's a very simple explanation. Sometimes a little bit more money is needed. We can help guide a student and parent in the right direction. We don't want them to find themselves during this first week of school with so many things going on, trying to figure out ways to cover the final amount on the bill. So they should contact us and we'll be happy to help them.
Okay. Joy, do you mind sharing your contact information with us?
I'd be happy to, Dr. Watson. We're available by phone at 803-777-8134 and by email at uscfaid@sc.edu.
Thank you.
Thank you.